A big welcome to How Do Men, a podcast with the ambition of building conversation, co-learning, and co-creation in order to find solutions, tools, and concrete tips for the modern man. Today, I'm very excited to be here with none other than Stefan Krakowski. So Stefan is an author and a senior consultant in psychiatry. He's been a columnist for most of the major newspapers, but he's also worked at the military headquarters and the Swedish Defense Academy. He's been Sweden's representative in a human rights committee of the Council of Europe, and his latest book is called INCEL-about involuntary celibacy and a male role in crisis. Wow, Stefan, big welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We're going to start the episode in the same way we always start, with the question, which is, what does being a man mean to you?
Wow, that's a big question, isn't it? I suppose being a man, in my case, is, as I'd say, similar to other men, most men, I suppose, as being, take responsibility, I'd say. Take responsibility for one's own life and also being there for family and friends, doing good in life, which sounds as cliches, I'm aware, but nevertheless, I think that's one of the major missions in life. But we do have, and I suppose we'll come back to that later on, we do have a crisis, I think, in terms of the male existence, not only in Sweden, but in most of the world, I'd say. So I think for me personally, taking responsibility and trying to do good, I think that would be a good, adequate summary, I suppose.
Thank you. This element of taking responsibility is something many come back to. Putting yourself to use, being a tool for whatever is necessary for your community or the people that you love, are always usually themes that seem to be so far, and this is something as well we're going to discover throughout this podcast, what being a man means. But I'm curious to learn a bit about how you have a rich life experience, and especially also with your profession. How did you arrive at that relatively simple statement of responsibility and being there for others? Was that always the case, or has it been a journey for you to reach that point?
It's definitely been a journey. I think it took some time. The thing is, I didn't really think that much in terms of male or female. One might as well apply the principle of doing good and being there and take responsibility to females as well. I think this, when it comes down to it, it's really a human condition. And I think a question that affects both genders. However, we live in a time when there's been I think, unfortunate development in terms of the male existence, at least in the Western world, and also I'd say in Asia. But coming back to myself and my journey, it took some time because I was brought up. I'm born and bred in Stockholm, but I did grow up in a family of where my parents were refugees, and being an only kid in a refugee family that's an experience, especially if you have a father that was traumatized due to his experiences during the Second World War. So I think I don't think I had that much time of sort of trying to figure out my what to do, and definitely not in terms of the male responsibility and the, that wasn't really the case. I just tried to do my best and be a good son and trying to obey the parents. But it's definitely a journey, I think, for most people. And as you go along, you pick up things and you hopefully have time to reflect, because I think that's one of the things we don't do nowadays. We don't reflect on things. We just, stumble along and soldier on as best as we can, regardless if we're a woman or a man, instead of reflecting on life. And I think asking oneself the question what one wants to do in life, really, not because of pressure from the outside, not because you have expectations from other people in the vicinity, but rather be true to yourself and sort of, and now it's cliche time again, follow your dreams, which is, I think, a thing I didn't do until I was older, because I didn't quite reflect on things, and I wasn't honest to myself. I didn't lack self-criticism. That one, I did have a lot of that, but I didn't really have the courage to ask myself where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do with my life, in terms of, at least professionally. And also other cases, because you do things you are supposed to do, and you do them, and you hope for the best. But I would dread the moment when you know that time's up in life and you have regrets, because you will have regrets. But at least when that time comes, I hope I will be able to look back on my life and say, well, I did my bloody best, and I really did make the right choices in the end. So that's all you can expect, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I mean, that's a lot of things come up in me right away when you share this. And first, to just summarize what I heard is really that you grew up in a situation and a family structure where there was not really much. First of all, being a lonely child or only child in a refugee situation, and there's just not much room for that sort of reflection. And I imagine, or I assume, that there was no, I guess, the role of the father, or there was no fatherly guidance about what manhood actually means, which is, I guess, something. I mean, besides what he did, but any actual initiation or anything, any form of.
Well, it was sort of. It's you see, it's I'm the first during looking back on the generations of my family. I was the first who didn't actually was called up for war and participating in war. My father was in the war. My grandfather was in also as an officer in the war. So I come from a family where we fought wars. We are warriors, not because we wanted to, because it was just a fact of life. If you are in the wrong place at the wrong time, that will happen to you. So I suppose in that respect, there wasn't any lack of male courage or sacrifice, but rather I'd say a sort of an overcompensation on the part of my father, who was raised rather strictly, very strictly, in a Prussian way, more or less, by his father. And I think my father overcompensated by sort of drowning me in love and affection, which could be a bit much. So yes, there was a male, and also he was, considering the age, his age and his experience, and coming from a different background than I did, he was very modern. He was very egalitarian. He was very empathetic. So yes, I picked up a lot, and learned a lot from him. He was a very loving man in many respects, but he had a heavy baggage, and being on the front and being wounded during the war, and it's you can't really expect that kind of with that kind of experience. You can't expect him to be a normal father, normal upbringing, because that will definitely be there all the time, present, the experiences. I think this is an experience I share with many other men and women, having parents or one of the parents who went through that kind of experience. I think that definitely molds you, and regardless if you want it or not, it will be part of your personality, part of your life. So, God, I'm rambling on. I suppose he was a role model in many ways, and I think being a child and you grow up, you, in the best case scenario, you pick up the good things and try to confer them to your sons and daughters, but also, learning, or actually being aware that that kind of things, well, I won't pick that up. I will leave that at the roadside. I won't, you sort of, you pick the best and you leave the rest. And hopefully you're good at raising your own kids if you get any later in life.
It seems almost. Thank you for going deeper into your own journey there with your father, and I understand. What comes up in me is also the. It seems almost universal that there is an counter action. Yeah, that is almost universal, where you have something and you're trying the best to give then your future generation, your own child, something better. But in that process, you tend to the pendulum sways in the other direction. I mean, you sharing what you just did reminded me of my relationship with my father, and he has not been in a war, but he was raised with a very unloving stepfather who had also 3 more kids. So he never received love at all. And his response was he was almost over affectionate, I would say, towards me, wanted to give me so much to the point where I said, just stand back,
right?
Leave me. I'm also an only child.
Yeah.
So leave me be. Yeah. And a therapist much later told me, giving someone too much, it can almost be as damaging as giving someone too little, because it stems from the same thing. You're not being seen for your needs, and this pendulum. And I'm receiving my first child now in July, and
that's great.
Yeah,
congratulations.
It's thank you. It's a daughter coming, and I'm beginning to see that. Probably the pendulum. I mean, for God's sake, I'm working now with men's work, and I'm very focused on the role of the father, trying to learn as much as possible. And I see myself providing a lot of leadership and structure and that sort of inspiration towards my children. But I imagine that there's a risk actually in this pendulum. I imagine there's a risk in also becoming overly, I would say, masculine, just because I believe that's what I was missing at the same time. So again, seeing, I think, really tapping into trying to see the child for its needs, its individual needs, and maybe also understanding that each child has a unique journey to go. So there's no one size fits all.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, so we do share the experience, obviously being an only child and overcompensating father, and a grandfather, I mean, the father's father being rather standoffish and very, very strict. It's and I can understand the mechanism, of course. You know, my father used to say, you know, when I always told myself that if I ever get a son, I will love him so very much. I will do exactly the opposite as, you know, compared to my father, what he did. And when he said that, I recall thinking that, yes, but please, you know, don't overdose. Don't, you know,
No.
but you can't say that. And at the same time, it's interesting because the generational gap between my grandfather and my father compared to the gap between me and my son, who's a grown up now, you can't even compare it. You know, it's almost, I mean, my son and I, we're very tight. We think the same. We have the same opinions. We love the same music. We have, you know, it's something completely different, of course. But then again, my father lived in a different time. He was quite old when he had me. And, you know, different country, Catholic country, a very, you know, class conscious society, to put it mildly. So there's a huge difference, but it also goes to show that the generational gap seems to be, you know, narrow as time goes by. I suppose that's my experience anyway.
It seems like it. We'll see now with the new kids. All the kids being born now are digitalized completely from the start,
which is a huge problem, which will increase definitely. That's really a huge problem. It will digitalization is damaging, and that will definitely be a challenge for you as a father, I think. How to cope with that particular situation, for sure.
Yes, because I try. I remember my youth of running around and playing outside and all that stuff, and it seems there's almost not sure if it's impossible to return to, or maybe that sort of upbringing will never more be due to the situation we have at this point, and rather trying to learn to navigate this new world. But I imagine that I'm already pissed off.
Yeah,
with my non-existent daughter about how much she's probably going to be using.
It's I'm sure you'll manage, but
yeah. I'd love to go back to some of the things you mentioned earlier as well. One of them being men and women both have responsibility as the key ingredients, which makes total sense. And I believe, and that's something that I've also, I mean, I would say personally, the why perhaps, because I sometimes get this question as well, like, do we have to assign responsibility more to men or women, or what's going on? And what I see, and also, it's really the women, why men are more perhaps in search for a way to be responsible is because women give birth. So that's already a relatively natural journey for a biological woman if they can have children to have. And for men, it is not so crystal clear. So we need to go out and find our way to be useful in another way. And connected to that, you also mentioned that go out and find what you love to do, and I like that. And I think I would love you to, if you can elaborate a bit on the act of, let's say I want to be a dancer or a musician, or I want to be an engineer. How is that passion or dream of mine connected to then, I guess, the underlying purpose of men of being responsible? You know, can I use my dancing? How do I use my dream of becoming a dancer in a way? How can I use that dream to make myself of use in a responsible way?
Um, I think that there's no contradiction between the two. I would even venture to say that the fact that you are fulfilling your dreams and follow your dreams will make you a more happy and harmonious person. Therefore, you will be, you could put yourself to better use, even better use for your, surroundings, for family and friends. Being, have the feeling of being fulfilled and at peace with oneself is I think, a basic condition to do good. But on the other hand, if you're not, if you are not happy or couldn't really can't find a meaning of life, in pursuit of meaning of life, then of course it could also be the same solution, namely to take care of, do good for other people. So it can work both ways, but I think there's doesn't have to be any kind of contradiction between following your dreams, and being a good human being. I think, on the contrary.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And that was the distinction I was hoping we'd arrive at as well. Because many people talk, there's a lot of talk in men's work about service. And sometimes I notice there's almost like a sacrificial service being communicated, perish yourself in the attempt of being of most use to the world. Whereas I see a person who is, for instance, loves to dance, and that becomes service because he does what he loves, and a dancer entertains his surrounding, and those then in the audience receive that energy and can use that energy in their work. Thus, the dancer is the most responsible by fulfilling his dream.
Yeah, I think so. Although you have quite a few cases where people, I'd say, especially if you are a creative person and having a creative work, there's always a risk of being too much full of yourself and disregard other people because you're so, I'd say, the creation, there's a call. You could call it a call in life. This is what I have to do. I have to fulfill this dream, and I'm an artist, and there's always a risk of being too narcissistic. I would even say that every one of us, regardless if you're a writer, author, or if you're a painter, whatever, a musician, a composer, those people are, I'd say, above average in terms of narcissism. Goes without saying. So I would say that there's always a risk of being too egocentric and maybe forget about the surroundings. But as long as you're aware of the risk, I think you'll be okay. I mean, there's obviously, there has to be an awareness of that. But again, fulfilling your dreams. Otherwise, if you don't fulfill your dreams, if you regard yourself as a failure, you're not good for anyone. That was the case again. To getting back to my father, that was his problem in life, and it was a huge part of my upbringing. His sense of failure, his sense of having failed in life. Although he survived a war, which is by itself a miracle, of course, but he always had this feeling of failure and bitterness and resent. And that weighed very heavily on me. That was really a huge part of my upbringing. Not to exaggerate, I mean, there was a loving parents, and I was a happy child, but this was always in the shadow of my father's thoughts and his sense of failure and his also lashing out from time to time because he had a privileged upbringing, and everything went upside down. Of course, war seem, they tend to do that, tend to uproot you, and tend to result in chaos in many respects.
Yeah, not that I've experienced it, but it's from all the stories I've heard, it certainly seems to be that case. And I like what you talked about there as well. It's funny, we in right now in the scalp training, we're going through purpose, mission, and when we're talking about mission, we're also talking about shadow mission. So mission is what my heart yearns for. To, for instance, inspire. Let's taking an artist, for instance, it's just a writer, inspire people, help people to experience a world of imagination. And then there's always intimately linked is the shadow mission, where I am basically doing all of this for my external validation. I do this because I want to be perceived as famous or whatever it is. And rather than trying to, because there are always this, I often hear, it's like either or, rather perhaps holding both perspectives at the same time. I think most of us are doing everything we do from a place of authentic hearts, as well as a narcissistic greed for external validation. And yes, you can probably lean more or less into one or the other, but I believe it's also very narcissistic to assume that you have gotten rid of your shadow, because it's always going to be there. And maybe instead of just being more open with it, instead of trying to hide it away, because we don't want to show it too much, be very open with it and say, these are my sides and this is the reason. I believe that is a level of evolution and the consciousness of people to be able to just go and say, here's both sides of me.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree.
Well, I want to continue this dialogue, and go back to what you said, which is also the cover and the topic of your book, the male role in a crisis, or the role of the man in crisis right now. And maybe, also share a bit about when did this crisis appear, or how did it appear, and why, and what's going on. So, open question about this topic.
I think it's difficult to pinpoint. I didn't really try to do that in the book either. I just wanted to write a book about, well, it started out with a group of men. And since I studied political violence at St. Andrews University, and I've always been interested in political violence, terrorism. And I heard about this group of men called incels, men living in involuntary celibacy, and there's been a number of terror acts committed by people who claim to be incels. I didn't really know that much about them. I wrote an essay in one of the Swedish newspapers about it. I think that was must have been 2018, or I think something like that, 17, 18. And it created quite a stir. And so I decided to look into it more in depth. And it turned out that there was a few articles, a few columnists who wrote about it, but it dawned on me that they didn't really know anything about the subject they wrote about, which isn't really anything new. You could read newspapers daily, and people writing about things they don't have any clue about at all, but still they have to have an opinion and they still have to write about it assertively. Anyway, so I decided to look into it more deeper, and it turned out that nobody had gone into the trouble of talking to these people. There were still opinions about them, but nobody had ever spoken to one. Yes, they've been on the internet. They've been, entering sites and reading tweets, but that was about it. So I decided if I wanted to write a book about this, I need to get in touch with these people, with this group. What kind of people are they? How do they think? What's their opinion about things? Do they all hate women? Are they all, terrorists in being? We didn't know. So to make a long story short, I managed to get in touch with a few of them, and by that time, I did a few interviews and I wrote about that. And so in those circles, they decided to accept me. They decided this is a good guy. We could talk to him because he's unbiased. He really wants to know more about us. And there was a urge from this group, still is, to tell their side of the story. So I did quite a lot of interviews and I wrote this book. But the thing is, the more I wrote, the more I researched, I realized that this is not an exclusive problem and confined to a small group of people. This is a problem about male and about men in general, and a problem in society where you have, where it begins in schools, where women now have better grades than boys in every subject, including sports, which is amazing. Mm. In primary school, in secondary school, high school, but also in universities, regardless of education, whether it's law, if you study law, or medicine, or any one of the most popular academic educations, you will find a majority being women. Now, at the same time, you have a widening gap. You have a situation where you have a growing group of women being well educated, making good money, and a group of men going in the opposite direction. Now, women in Sweden and in most other countries still pick their mates based on education and income, especially income. It's a traditional way of meeting your partner. Even in an equal society as Sweden, doesn't really matter. You still had a traditional way of selecting a partner. So this creates a problem. You have an increasing amount of men falling behind, not being wanted in the job market or as a partner. So it was to me, it was quite apparent that this is a societal problem and it is a common problem we all should care about and we all should be aware of. Now, so I wrote the book and that's why I called it a crisis, a male role in crisis. Also, if you look at men as a group, not only do they fall behind in school, in education, the majority of suicides are committed by men, 75%. Accidents in the workplace, men. Soldiers in battle being killed are men. I could go on and on. So there's definitely we do have a problem, and it's a growing problem. You would also I could also point to the fact that at a large amount of men don't have any close friends, a close friend at all. They live not only in celibacy but in loneliness.
Mm.
So when did this all start? I suppose when we changed the school system again, which we did a number of times. I think there's somebody who said that there's a reason why the previous generations did very well in school in Sweden, because the system was okay. It wasn't perfect, but it was okay compared to today. So you don't have to invent the wheel again. You could just look at the things that worked. And you don't need to create new problems. If some things work, just leave it as it is. So I'm not saying that we should go back to the old school, so like it used to be, but there were a few elements that really was positive. And also, I have this feeling that there was a time when girls didn't do very well at school. Then the politicians and the government said at the time that this is definitely a problem for society. We need to do something. Politicians, we need to make decisions to support the girls. Whereas now, since a few years back, when boys fail in school, it sort of feels that it's the boys' responsibility to do something, not society, which to me is incomprehensible. Not to mention the fact that I wrote an article in one of the major newspapers in Sweden, Dagens Nyheter, because I was sick and tired of the fact that men were used as punch bags in the debate. Didn't have to do anything with a specific question. It was just a way for women writers and columnists to kick, to make fun of men, to write rudely about men, because that's what we always did. Making men a laughing stock, making men responsible for things, and ridiculing men. And there is a pattern of doing this. And so I got fed up with it, and I wrote an article, and that was really created a stir, quite a stir, and reactions. And the funny thing was that every one of the journalists who attacked me, there were a few women writers who attacked me. Not one of them said I was wrong. Not one of them. What they said was that, yes, this is the case, and this is a thing that men of today has to accept, being punching bags, because historically women were suppressed by men, which didn't make any sense at all to me. And so if you wanted, and they were talking and writing about a gender war. And I said, and I wrote, is this really the way we want to go? Really? Is this the constructive way of dealing with problems? I don't think so. So yeah, that's, and it goes on. It's still the usual suspects writing about stuff and sort of involving men in this evil game. So that I wanted to write that because I never really, to be honest, I've never seen societal problems in terms of male or female, not really. Doesn't mean to say I'm not aware of the inequalities historically, definitely. But and I worked internationally for human rights, and that included women in very, very many cases. So, I don't need a reminder of the inequalities. My point is that I didn't really I grew up in a family where there was equality between my mother and father, definitely, no question. I had more female bosses than men in my line of work. Didn't really reflect on it that much, but so I didn't really look at things that way. But now it's obvious for everyone to see that this, since a few years back, I think we do have a problem with the male population, not only in Sweden, but in big parts of the world.
Well, thank you for sharing those findings and your whole journey there with the book and what you've arrived at. Many things arise in me immediately. First, I'm very curious to learn about, because to me it seems, firstly with the performance in school, I was surprised to hear that. Has there been a time when men, because I always thought that was the case, because I think that the general story goes that women are just more evolved than men and smarter, and that's why, and perhaps a bit more disciplined, or like take things a bit too serious, like take things more seriously. I never knew, or didn't know that there was there a time when there was another school system which created a more even or equal level of performance between men and women?
I think it was, yes, because now one of the major problems, and this is interesting because there's been a taboo to talk about biological differences between girls and boys. We all know that these exist. We all know that that girls develop faster than boys. The boys catch up in the end, yes, but during those years, crucial years in school, there's definitely biological difference, and the system as it has been, is to the advantage of girls. If you have a school assignment where you are supposed to analyze and reflect and find fact-finding, do a fact-finding homework, then obviously girls are much better suited biologically than boys in that respect. So yes, and it wasn't like that a couple of decades ago. There was a system where you had a traditional way of teaching, where you had to learn things, and boys are very good at learning things, by heart, and but they need clear instructions. You can't, and I would say that the present school system isn't really that favorable to girls either, to be quite honest, because it's all, again, going back to the digital discussion we had a few minutes ago. You need a reference, you need a basic knowledge in order to reflect and analyze things. You can't expect people to Google everything, or it's a failed system, I think. And now, which is very positive, I think the present government is quite aware of this, and they are actually trying to change the system, including the digital problem, going back to pencil and paper, more or less. So yes, there's I think there will be a change for the better, but definitely the system as of now, and during the past decade, I think definitely was more suitable for girls because they were more mature. They mature faster than boys, and you have to take that into account. And we haven't done that in Sweden, and it's also been as I said, it's a forbidden subject. It wasn't really a thing you could discuss, because the biological the biological differences between men and women. I'm just thinking about other topics. it's a hot topic in many respects, but you know, in terms of school, definitely it has to be taken into account. There's also been a discussion, and almost a fact, that there's been some kind of anti-education opinion, anti-education, as if this is something also typical for boys, as some kind of school culture among boys, that it's a bad thing to study. You know, you mustn't study. You're being a nerd if you study. It's a negative thing. And it turns out that, you know, according to research, it doesn't really make any sense. It's not like that at all. It's just that boys have a tendency to give up if they fail, and if they don't get a proper assistance and care in school, they just tend to give up, and they have this feeling of being inferior. You know, they don't want to. There's no effort at all. They think of themselves as failures. I'm not good enough. I can't keep up. So they give up. They don't do anything. So they need this kind of encouragement and assistance, and I think they didn't really get that because. And also, teachers tend to favor girls in school. We know that for sure. Just in my book, I write about this, that turns out that teachers expect more of girls. They tend to grade girls, give girls higher grades than boys for the same effort, because boys will be boys, girls will be girls. So there's a few research projects, research results, which are very interesting, but where you find that if a girl gets graded by an external teacher, an expert, the girl will receive a lower grade than from her own teacher. And so forth. So there's been a bias, definite bias in school as well in terms of grading of boys as opposed to girls.
Just so I get that right. So girls get better grades in general for the same effort.
Yeah.
But what you said there in the end, an external teacher will give girls lower grades.
Yeah, compared to the teacher in school.
Okay, so you look at the same effort.
Yeah, but because as your own teacher tend to grade girls higher.
Yeah.
Because they're girls. The authority, the school authority in Sweden, Skolmyndigheten, did I think a research project, you know, came to the same result. So
is that because most teachers are women or female?
I think that plays a part. That would play a part, I would say, yeah, but not necessarily, because there's some kind of it depends. You know, it has to do with expectations really of girls and boys.
Yeah,
boys tend to be more rowdy, more immature, and so you need to support them because of that. And this is a domino effect. Of course, if you fail in school, you don't get high grades, you can't get into the university, and you will not find a decent job, and you will not be very attractive as a partner. As I said before, it's, you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, something needs to be done.
Well, something needs to be done. And I love this subject because it's such a vast subject with regards to education. I mean, when I think of education, and I studied it all the way up to university, and I'm still scratching my head a bit, and because I can't really remember what it is that I learned. I don't I went 3 years in business school and I don't remember anything of it. If someone asked me, I mean, it's just small basic things. For me, I have a sense that education needs to be reformed completely, as in, you know, I actually said that today as well in the sculpt training. I said I went to the one of the top graded business schools, Handels. Not a single session ever was on like sales and presentation skills. So how can you go and how can you lose out on one of the most crucial pieces of business and entrepreneurship, which is sales?
And this is an elite school.
That's the thing. Not a single, and nothing around the importance of adaptability. I mean, today we have a situation where we don't know many of the jobs in 20 years from now, 30 years from now. We can't even spell them. We don't know what they're going to be. So yeah. How can you prepare people today for a future that we don't know? I think we need to go back to basics. The importance of finding your own superpower, like finding your own unique traits and your skill sets, playing on your strengths, learning about sales, learning about entrepreneurship, many of those elements, and also learning about AI, like going in and really going deeper. Today, at least I'm not sure. It was 10 years ago I studied. It might have changed over the years. I hope so. But I just remember coming into, there was a very big discrepancy. So when I came out after 3 years of business school, I started working in London as in investment banking. And what I got there was just 3 months of basically 12 hours a day of studies. And I was sat there alongside musicians and artists and whatever. So they said, we're going to just teach you everything in 3 months. And that's it. I was like, why did I study? What did I study?
That's surprising. That surprises me because, because going into banking after Handels from the business school of Stockholm, that would be the logical step for, I think, a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, and there's definitely I mean, I like what Karolinska is doing. They have integrated practice as part of their education. They try to do that, but it's not well constructed enough in business school. So you teach something that is not applicable. If I were to come with those like financial modules and formulas to the bank, they would just say, "Are you stupid? Get rid of that. That's not how we use it. That's not how we roll in real life."
Is that because it's out of date, or is it because they don't?
Exactly. Well, it's out of date, and there's a difference between theory and practice. And I believe teaching people today what it actually means much faster. Like these KI, educations, I think is going to thrive much more in the future than these foundational large topics. The world is just evolving too fast for something like that to be able to sustain itself, I believe.
Yeah.
But it goes all the way down to throughout my entire years in school. I mean, you said it was a good system. Yeah, maybe. I still think that I didn't feel equipped for life. And I believe school should really try and why I think something that could be applied and maybe a reason why boys find it more difficult to focus is because of our biological need for movement and activity.
That's true. That's true. I think one of the obvious reasons why you were better equipped having gone to school before was the simple fact that you read books. I owe everything because I read to books, and because I read, my parents read a lot, and I read a lot of books. So, and I owe it all to that, to my big appetite in terms of reading books. And nowadays they don't. You can't really, you don't learn anything by being on TikTok. You don't get to have a critical mind. You don't have any references. You will be a failed individual. And it shows. It shows, regardless if you read articles so badly written, it's embarrassing, or whether you hear Generation Z, express themselves or having strong opinions about things. They don't know shit today. And that's because they don't read. They can hardly write. It's a problem at the universities. When I meet university teachers, they are absolutely devastated because they say to students, they write stuff and you can't make out what they want to say because it's so badly written. It's copy and paste kind of papers they write. And if they fail, which they do from time to time, obviously, they blame the teacher. They blame the university teacher because it's the teacher's responsibility to teach us things and to make us succeed in life. So yes, I'm exaggerating a bit, but it's obvious that something has gone very, very wrong. And it has to do with the fact that people don't read, they don't, they listen to stuff, they watch stuff, which is all good, but it's not a, you can't really, you miss out on life if you don't have the opportunity to reflect, to use your fantasy, to absorb a text, to get the mind working. You miss something essential in life. Watching stupid things on TikTok doesn't make you a intelligent person. It makes you stupid. I think, and if on top of that you go to school and you feel out as an outsider, not being able to keep up, then what do you have in the end? It's nothing.
It's nothing. I feel that this is really perhaps we're coming at reaching a core here of one of the big reasons for the male. Like I love how we have arrived here, and you've opened up my eyes to how important education is, and I would want us to gradually move towards like where is this going to go? Like, what do you see? What's going to happen here, really? And what do you see as the way forward? Are you bullish or bearish, speaking in like trading terms? You see that we have further down to the hole to go, or do you see a journey from now? Do you see any changes happening? Are you hopeful?
One has to be, yes. I have a tendency to, regardless if we speak about education, the international problem, the wars going on, and so forth, I do have a, I want to look at things optimistically, and I do to a certain respect. Maybe because I have other references historically. Oh, again, going back to my family, I've been a few times in my life. I've been in very serious trouble, mortal trouble. So having survived that, I have maybe another outlook compared to the average person. I've been taken hostage. I've been in situations where I was absolutely convinced that I would be killed. No question. And I survived those instances few times in life. And because of that, I have a tendency of maybe see things in another way. I think that where another person would regard something as a major problem, I would say, no, this is not a problem. This is a problem that can be solved. It's not something irreversible. So I tend to see that in another way, in another I have another outlook in that respect. So to answer your question, you will always have a reaction to something going wrong. It may take time, but hopefully it will create a reaction and a change in the end. I, of course, find it deplorable that it takes so much time. It takes too much time in order to change things, and also being aware of things. But I think that even the most stupid, even the most pointless developments in society will in the end, people will in the end realize that we have to change this because this is lunacy. This can't possibly go on. So yes, I think I have some kind of optimism after all, yes, but you have to make people aware. You have to, and also have the courage. You have to have the courage to say, stop this nonsense, because this is getting us nowhere. This is just destruction. This can't go on. Yes, I think and also you mentioned AI. I think AI will give us tremendous opportunities in the future. I don't believe for a minute that robots will take over our lives, and that's just plain stupid. AI offers us immense possibilities in the future. In medicine, for instance, in terms of manual work, regardless how you look at it, I think it's a tremendous opportunity. We should use it to our benefit, to our advantage, rather than just ban it or be afraid of it. Panic will get us nowhere. So yes, there's room for optimism, I think.
Amazing, definitely. I fully agree. I like to think in the law of polarity. You know, for every opposite of every action, there's an opposite reaction. So we have a crisis in the world of men at the moment, and I see that you're writing about it. This podcast being created, our sculpt training program. It's just a natural. Sometimes I feel as though I'm simply a tool for energetic work to be constructed. So if there's a lot of darkness, there's a lot of light, and it just happens through us. So in that sense, I'm also very hopeful, or not necessarily like hopeful. I think one should always have, but just not so concerned about or worried, because I personally, I like what you said as well about having been through hardships, having been through certain psychological death processes, brings a level of peace to the storm. And just I went through cancer and many 3 years of chemotherapy, and that was my death process. And since then, I've just felt more relaxed about the thing, and whatever's going on, and I wouldn't say I enjoy the storm, but I feel that this is something we need to ride through in order for us to. Something needs to. It feels like we need a little more of the negative for something completely new to arrive. That's my feeling. But maybe it's not going to be this surge of explosive new. Rather, it's just a never-ending flow of, like a molding evolution.
Yeah, I not to be too self-aware and too cocky, but I think having survived, in your case, an illness, severe illness, or having survived, in my case, a few times, moments when you are absolutely convinced that you will be executed. I think that give maybe you and me a unique position in order to tell, to teach, to even lead, as you do, other people who didn't go through this, I think those kind of experiences are invaluable. I think makes you realize, gives you another outlook on life, and gives you realize what's important in life. So I think we have you have a extremely important mission to fulfill.
Thank you for seeing that, and I agree with you, and I think the antidote to suffering is to suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be the only way to actually experience a lot of suffering, and then at some point you just suffer less.
Mm-hmm.
Seems to be no shortcuts. Rather, you have to just go through it.
Yeah, and the notion that we, if you're not happy in every given moment in life, there's something very wrong. That's the attitude of many people today, especially young people, which is absolutely absurd. Our brain wasn't constructed in order to experience happiness every time, all the time, an endless way of, endless happiness trip through life. It's not like that at all. The brain was created in order to survive the day. And if you occasionally experience some kind of happiness, that's a bonus in life.
Exactly.
That's a bonus. You should be grateful. I mean, the mere fact that we exist on this earth is a miracle.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. You one in a billion.
Yeah.
So appreciate it instead of moaning and complaining all the time that life has no meaning. Give it meaning. And if you don't find any meaning in your life, make other people happy. Make it your mission to make other people happy, to help out. I think that's one of the major things in life.
Yeah. Remembering, and that's not a topic we'll go much into, but remembering, and it seems the raising of children has also cost a bit of, because I remember being told, pursue happiness, like whatever makes you happy, what makes you happy. There was not much talk about suffering. Like, I wish someone would have told me, like, no matter what you do, you're going to go through a bunch of crises. You're going to suffer like hell for a few times, and those will be the moments that they look back towards and say, thank God that happened, because it improved. Mm-hmm. And then invariably, every now and then, you'll feel surges of happiness. Most of the time, it's going to be a lot of hard work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If someone had set that stage and actually communicated that to me, I believe I would have gone into life more appreciative.
Yeah, people, and the thing is, people don't realize they're the lucky ones. They're the lucky ones.
Yeah.
And it always amazes me. And again, I try to, actually, when I work in a hospital and occasionally people are being admitted for no reason at all, which is, by the way, that's another podcast, the problem in psychiatry today. We admit people to, for care who doesn't really have no business being there at all. Anyway, so occasionally these people are being admitted, 20, 22 years old, 23 years old. I'll commit suicide. There's no meaning in my life. And nothing happened. There's no trauma. There's nothing. There's just no meaning in life. And at those particular times, when it's the right moment, I do say those things. I'm the only one who does it. No one of my colleagues would ever venture to say such a thing, or wouldn't dare say such a thing. But I think it's only fair to say to that person exactly what I told you, that, you, the lucky one, you can't find any meaning in your life, then make other people happy. You will have, you will experience happiness through others.
Yeah.
And every time when I say that, they go into shock. No, they didn't even contemplate that, didn't even think about that. They didn't even reflect on that at all, because it's only me.
Yeah.
And TikTok. That's the only thing. So I think people they need that reminder from time to time. And they need to hear it from someone. So I could be the bad guy,
Yeah.
but hopefully the good guy. Hopefully the good guy by saying that.
Yeah. And I think makes me very hopeful to hear, and that we need to have those things repeated, because one would think it's already been stated numerous times. The best way for happiness is to make other people happy.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is the path. Yet we have built a society built on selfish.
Yes.
And that's such a discrepancy there. So we already know this. It seems like most, maybe not everybody, but most educated people know that the way towards happiness is to make other people happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we have not built a system around it. And it seems like we need to have it repeated and repeated and repeated, or go through death processes or in crises, which will then automatically give you gratefulness. But sadly, and it seems like maybe the humankind or humanity needs to go through a death process in itself on a collective level. It's sort of a feeling I personally have at the moment. Maybe something big is about to happen over the next 10 or 20 years. I don't know.
Yeah, we do have the fact also the country we live in, Sweden, has been living in peace in over 200 years, which also that's amazing. But at the same time, it's you take things for granted. You don't realize the danger even when it's in front of you. So that's also an aspect. That's also if you're talking about we'll be talking about on the individual level now, what needs to be done, but on a societal level, national level, you could apply the same principle really by having not experienced any danger, any at least lived under the apprehension that there's nothing that can threaten us at all. We have lived in peace for hundreds and hundreds of years, and we will continue to do so. Is also an interesting observation, and it explains a lot of things in terms of Swedish domestic politics as well. But we won't go into that right now.
No, that is another podcast for the moment. I felt so agile the other day because my 4G went down and I have Telia, and I remember thinking maybe now it's happening, but then it just went up again. So
yeah.
So I feel at least I am aware that of some sorts. But Stefan, it's been such a wonderful conversation with you.
Likewise.
I wish we had more time. It feels like we're opening up the possibility of another episode further down the line for us to explore deeper. But I'm very thankful. Thank you for opening up my understanding about the crucial need for education to be reformed or looked at and harmonized in order to be more suitable for both genders. Both biological sexes and that among many other things. But with that, I want to say thank you again and hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me.